Did you know that there is a commonality between the Enlightenment in Europe and the Enlightenment in Greece? You know, that happened in 400 before Christ, 400 years before Christ. So picture this. In Greece, there is this era where we usually think is the explosion of thought. This is the peak of the Greek thought of civilization, you could say. Some people call it that. Back in those times, it was a time where people just kept on bringing out ideas which were unique, and they were characterized as different from the pre existing ideas, especially in religion. And this happened, guess what? During an expansion of trade. So, what happened was trade was starting to happen when this explosion happened, this explosion of thought happened. So, before these thinkers, we call them sophists, philosophists. They love Sophia, or is, if I'm not mistaken, thought. Before the era of the thinkers, this is the era of the Iliad, of the Homer. You know the story of Odysseus. And it was the common religion of the people of the Greece. But then there was starting a rebellion of thought in which, you know what, maybe it isn't the truth, because the gods are depicted as fighting each other, they're loving each other and waging wars. You know what, maybe gods don't actually do that. So they created their own ideas. What is the difference? What is the similarity of this with the Enlightenment? I'm pretty sure we all have heard of the Renaissance or the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is kind of what I see is a continuation of the Renaissance. But the Renaissance happened when there was an existing religion, an existing model of thought, which is Christianity, Roman Christianity in Europe, in Western Europe. And it was telling us basically what to think, what the world is, how are we supposed to think, how are we supposed to approach things. And at the time, we would think of everything in the perspective of theology. We would think with theology at the fore, at the center. But at the time of the Renaissance, we started thinking at the ourselves. We started thinking by ourselves, not using theology. We started thinking with the mind, which created much more art. You've probably seen the Mona Lisa, which came during the Renaissance, and many other arts which were different, which were pioneering. And one of the pioneering movements of the Renaissance would probably even be classified as the travels. Christopher Columbus, he dared to travel to the Americas, and before him, some people from Portugal, they dared to go down to Africa, all the way to India by themselves. At the time where people had no idea what the seas were like, what was at the end of the sea. There was the end of the sea back then. There was sea monsters in the end of the sea. But they dared to go against what the common thought was, which was, in the Christianity, in the model of Christianity. Not saying that Christianity is a bad thing. It's just the frame of thought back then was challenged, and this came, you could say, from trade. It was trade that opened these up. Economy that first opened up the pioneering spirit. People say that the Renaissance first came in Florence. That's why it's the Renaissance. It's such a an Italian name and some French name, Italian name, the Renaissance. It came from Florence in Italy. It came when Florence was a merchant state. It was no longer a feudal, kingly, princely, aristocratic state. They were merchants, and merchants had a big saying. And where does merchant get money? They get money from trade. They will, trade through the sea and through many other places. So what I'm getting at here is, could it be that the economic spirit will bring about freedom of thought? Because it happened twice.